Montreal is going carbon neutral by 2050. In an effort to prevent and slow climate change, the City of Montreal has put a plan in place to adopt 46 actions to meet this target. Carbon neutrality is putting zero impact on the planet. This is done through having a balance between emitting carbon and absorbing it in our atmosphere through carbon sinks. Carbon sinks are forests, oceans, and soil. Part of making Montreal carbon neutral is providing more green spaces. The City of Montreal has committed to planting 500,000 trees by 2030. Montreal is already feeling the effects of climate change through flooding and heat waves, but things can get much worse if action isn't taken.
Climate disaster predictions include flooding in Montreal, with low-lying areas of the city being underwater within the next 80 years.
Canada is also aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050.
It's ambitious and it's achievable. It's ambitious because it will get us to 40% lower emissions by 2030 compared to 2005 and keep us on track to net zero by 2050.
But some say carbon neutrality by 2050 for both Montreal and Canada is far too late.
2050 is not enough, and sadly I doubt that the actual plan would get us that far anyway. The actual plans only for 2020 to 2030. It aims for a 55% emissions reduction, and I'm really not certain it will manage that. But then again, when we say that the 1.5 target means carbon neutrality by 2050, we are talking about worldwide carbon neutrality.
In 2021, the Climate Crisis Advisory Group published a report stating that net zero targets are no longer adequate to prevent large-scale global disaster, and these efforts will not limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Instead of net zero strategies, both the Climate Crisis Advisory Group and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change urges for net negative strategies. This is said to be the only way to ensure that greenhouse gas levels can return to pre-industrial levels. If we cannot do this, it's likely that global temperatures will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius as soon as 2030, taking the world into a zone of dangerous climate change. So how can Montreal become carbon neutral in less than 20 years? Some of the commitments made by the city include reducing food waste, promoting the use of electric vehicles downtown, converting parking lots into green spaces, and constructing low-carbon buildings that consume less energy in order to meet carbon targets. The City of Montreal will also begin applying a climate test on all city decisions to ensure that greenhouse gas emissions are limited and beneficial impacts on the environment are maximized. Geoffroy says the plan includes great ideas, but that a zero-oil future needs to be planned.
The idea of submitting most major decisions to a climate test is one good thing. The idea of banning oil in residential and commercial buildings for heating purposes, that's something that should have been done ages ago. But then again, the plan does not say anything about natural gas, which is just as much as a problem as oil is. We must also be aware that there are profound limitations on what a city municipal government can do. In the end, we will need to do drastic things like shut down the refineries in the east of Montreal. We will need to eventually ban all cars running on oil. That's a thing a municipal government cannot do. So, but yes, Montreal is taking interesting steps, but that, for the most part, sadly, steps that should have been taken 10, 20 years ago.
Advancements towards carbon neutrality are already happening in Montreal. So let's take a look at some examples within our city. Researchers at Concordia have been developing windows made of solar panels with the goal of achieving a net zero building. This is a building that powers its electricity through solar energy implemented within its own structure. Carbon neutrality isn't just happening in buildings, but in entire schools. Outside of Montreal, in Quebec, the University of Sherbrooke became carbon neutral this past June, 8 years ahead of schedule. Dawson College, an English cégep in downtown Montreal, has been carbon neutral since 2019.
We've been reducing our carbon footprint with intent since, it goes back decades, really. We attempted to be carbon neutral by offsetting the remaining tonnage. The Board of Governors had a unanimous vote that we would be carbon neutral forever, which includes transportation. Our students travel 140,000 kilometers per day to get here, and we offset that as well. Institutes of higher education have to model what it is we want our students to do and make decisions of when they get into the industrial world or the political world. And it has to, for me, it has to start here.
Efforts at Concordia, Dawson, and Sherbrooke show that we can start carbon neutrality within our own communities, instead of waiting on politicians to take climate action.
It's easy to say, okay, write an essay about climate change. But when you actually give them hands-on, work, they're more dedicated. And of course, they take a sense of ownership. Now they've put their work and they feel so good knowing that, oh my gosh, it's so intimidating to think, oh my God, climate change, I have to change the whole world. But to know that, oh, I helped my own little community, my own Dawson community.
What challenges do we face in achieving carbon neutrality?
I think the biggest issue is politicians with their 4-year life cycle. That's the problem. It's nice to say 2050, and as a politician, I can say, well, I'll let the next person take care of it because I'm going to worry about my immediate 4 years.
Capitalism also stands in the way of Montreal achieving carbon neutrality.
There are these cultural norms that are really prevalent in our society and that are, driven by capitalism. Some of the values that would underlie a circular economy are fundamentally at odds with our current capitalist system. I think it's possible for us to adopt new values, but I don't think we should be naive about how challenging that transition would be, because we're talking about a complete cultural revolution, a completely different way of being in this world. So it's not just about having the technology. It's about seeing business differently, seeing our role as consumers differently, valuing different things.
We will be striking on September the 23rd. Our main objective for September the 23rd is to address the provincial government. We will be in provincial elections. Montreal is taking, sadly, the steps that should have been taken 20 years ago.
Do you think Montreal can achieve carbon neutrality by 2050? Or is this just a pipe dream? Let us know what you think below in the comments.